then do you share my frustration that much of the sector feels as well, that 3 years, which then butts up any decision close to an election. Now, when we've had social care reforms be kiboshed in the past, it has been during election campaigns. Surely the way to solve this would be to get this done and dusted during this Parliament, not kick it into the long grass, so that it can then be kiboshed at the next election.
No one has rattled Starmer quite like this before. One fearless MP went after him live, tearing apart the tactics he used to win power and accusing him of abandoning the very people he promised to protect. She didn't just question him, she dismantled him. Starmer froze, stumbled over his words, and struggled to respond. But what exactly did she say that left him exposed and humiliated on live television? In this video, let's break down the full story.
Thank you, Prime Minister. So following on from the questions from Ms. Owen in particular, thinking about those with disabilities, we had a round table, the Health and Social Care Committee, in this very room, and almost where I'm sat was a woman who described her experience of NHS and care. And the way she paraphrased it was, the NHS keeps me alive, but social care is what helps me to thrive. So, Prime Minister, how do you see the role of social care in our community?
Layla Michelle Moran, MP and chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, directly confronted Keir Starmer. She shared the story of a woman who spoke a painful truth. Social care is not a luxury. It is survival. It is the support that makes life bearable for millions of people. And yet, when faced with that stark reality, Starmer did not respond with urgency or compassion. Instead, he fell back on the familiar tone of a rehearsed political speech.
Hugely. In its own right and working alongside the NHS. And I think, like most people, I've long thought we ought to
really care. Long thought. That's his opening. This is how Starmer tries to wash his hands of responsibility, claiming he has always been thinking about it. But thinking is not action. It is just vague nostalgia. Reflecting on something for years while doing nothing is exactly why people are trapped in this broken system. Starmer has been Prime Minister for the past 10 months, and now he says he is considering reform. Maybe he will keep ignoring the issue so he can promise to fix it again in the next election campaign. That is how third world leaders behave, and Keir Starmer is acting the same way.
Reform it, which is why we've asked Louise Casey to carry out that reform programme and to do it on a cross-party basis. She starts her work this month. I have expressly asked her to try to reach out straight away on a cross-party basis because we need to reform social care. We need to make sure that if we do reform it, it's large.
You can see the familiar Starmer move. Outsource responsibility. Shift the burden to a review. Buy yourself 2 or 3 years and hope people forget. This is the same Louise Casey who has been used before as a political airbag. She delivers reviews, not revolutions. Starmer says she begins her work this month. Brilliant. People have been pleading for help for years, and the grand solution is that someone is only now starting to examine it. That is meant to impress us. It is not impressive. It is insulting.
Lasting reform, I don't think that that's possible unless it's a cross-party consensus about how we go forward with social care. It is hugely important, as I say, in its own right, and to complement what we do with the NHS. Very hard to get the NHS back working as we want if we don't also sort out social.
Let me translate what Starmer really means here. He is basically saying, I am not going to take any political risk or firm position. I will hide behind the illusion of consensus. This is classic technocratic cowardice. You are the Prime Minister, not a neutral facilitator at a town hall. Lead or leave. Starmer even admitted it is very hard to make the NHS work unless we fix social care. That is true. But here is the problem. He has said this before. Every government has. You admit the crisis is urgent, yet you build bureaucratic barriers instead of breaking through them. It feels like gaslighting. You admit the house is burning, then schedule a fire inspection for 2028. That is when Layla asked the toughest, simplest question. True.
An enabler to the economy. My sister's a care worker, by the way, so I know this from first hand. I mean, absolutely. It's about ensuring that people can live to their full potential for as long as possible in their lives.
This was a trap, a pressure question with only two exits. Either Starmer admits the Treasury views social care as a financial drain, or he finally says something bold. Instead, he tries to play both sides. But the question itself is heavy with pain. It exposes just how disconnected government policy has become from the people who rely on care every single day. And guess how Starmer answered it?
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, but then do you share my frustration that much of the sector feels as well, that 3 years, which then butts up any...
And here it is again, the desperate personal card. When cornered by serious policy scrutiny, Starmer reaches for his sister's job to appear grounded and in touch. But let's be honest, mentioning your sister does not raise underpaid care workers' wages or stop the staff exodus. It is a classic political tactic. Personalize the answer when you have nothing substantial to offer. It is the social care version of saying, I have a black friend.
Election. Now, when we've had social care reforms be kiboshed in the past, it has been during election campaigns. Surely the way to solve this would be to get this done and dusted during this Parliament, not kick it into the long grass, so that it can then be kiboshed at the next election.
That is where she went straight at Starmer. What she truly meant was simple. Starmer had time, but he chose to delay. She was not asking a question. She was delivering an indictment. She pulled Starmer into the open and said, you used the entire parliamentary term to stall, so real decisions could be buried behind election campaigns. It was damning. She exposed the old political trick of dragging issues out, then claiming your hands are tied because an election is too close. Starmer did not deny it because he cannot. Before we go any further, are you enjoying the video? If you are, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive coverage of the major changes unfolding on Offscript. Now, let's continue.
Firstly, I understand your frustration that this has been pushed down the road too many times. The way I see it is this. One, we need to take time to get it right, and it needs to be cross-party. And Louise Casey is, in my view, the right person on a project like this. I've got huge experience working with Louise Casey. But that shouldn't stop us doing things straight away, to answer your question, which is why we made available £3.7 billion of additional funding for social care authorities in 25-26. That is really important as a sort of first step, and obviously took steps in relation to carers allowance, weekly earnings limit, a fair pay agreement for social for adult social care, hugely important. All the analysis shows that we haven't got a sufficient workforce. It's a fragmented workforce, and that most people leaving social care are leaving social care to go to the NHS because they can get onto an integrated framework for progression, which they don't have. So I think all of those things can be done before we even get to the bigger question. So I don't think we should rush the work that Louise Casey is doing. I think that's the right timetable, but I accept your challenge that what we can't do is to sit back until she gets to that part of her report and do nothing in the interim. And I think that the money we've put in, the fair pay agreements and other measures are really important. I should also say that it's among the reasons I commissioned Louise to report in 2 stages, one in 2026 and then later in 2028. And we can get the 2026 recommendations and start acting on them before we get to 2028. So I don't agree with you totally that we should just go sort of both feet in with all the reform right now. We need time on that, but I do accept the thrust of your challenge, which is we do need to do things now, and that's why we're doing what we are doing in the interim.
This is no coincidence. She is implying that social care is paraded like a campaign banner for votes, then quietly folded away once the cameras disappear. Starmer claims he is different, but she is saying you are playing the same game, just in a slightly more expensive suit. Isla argued the best way to solve this is to get it done during this Parliament. This was a public execution. She is daring him. Fix it now, or admit you are waiting to bury it again. She presents inaction as cowardice, and she is right. Starmer has the power, the majority, and the platform. If it does not happen now, it is because he chose not to make it happen.
True.
Do you accept that much of that money, in fact, has not been able to get to the front line because of the NICS increases?
Well,
because social care sits outside. So whilst local authorities have had some money flow down to them, it barely covers the NICS increases for those social care providers.
I mean, it's £3.7 billion of additional funding. That's a huge uplift. It's 6.8% in cash terms.
But the amount that's going to the independent social care providers is about 800 million to
880 million.
Indeed, to local authorities, which is about the bill for the NICS increase.
Well, look, I mean, it's a huge cash terms increase that's
which isn't actually
gone
going
through.
to deliver anything new. It's just going to pay you.
It's alongside the work we're doing on carers allowance. It's alongside the work we're doing on fair pay agreements, which I do think will make a material difference. It's a signitent amount of additional funding to the funding that was put in before.
But do you see
when times are quiet, when as you will know, there are quite significant budgetary constraints.
This is Starmer's classic double mass performance. Sound emotionally aligned while doing nothing operationally. He starts by acknowledging the delay, a soft, rehearsed line meant to disarm Moran, then quickly pivots to his favorite excuse. We need time. But here is the truth. He already has the time and the power. He is the Prime Minister with a majority. He does not need Louise Casey to tell him care homes are collapsing or staff are fleeing. So what does he do? He outsources responsibility. He hands a crisis to a review committee, fully aware that reports do not repair broken showers or hire burned-out carers. This is not reform. It is deliberate delay. Even worse, he sells future money as the answer to today's emergency. £3.7 billion, 2 years from now. It will arrive too late, and it will not reach the front line because, as Moran later points out, it will be swallowed by existing cost increases. He knows that, yet he says it anyway. Why? Because he is not trying to solve the crisis. He is trying to appear as if he is. He even drops technical phrases like carers allowance and fair pay agreements, vague signals with no clear funding, no deadlines, no force. It is filler. The entire response is a polished PR bubble, hollow and carefully inflated, just high enough to avoid bursting in Parliament. But Layla is about to pierce it. True.
You see, the issue here is that we're trying to shift a dial, and the money that you're talking about is always welcome, but it's barely shifting that dial. Do you recognise that there is a cost to not reforming the system as well, both to human costs but also to getting people in work and keeping them in work?
Yes, that's why I want to reform the system, absolutely.
Because we are currently looking at this as a committee, but are surprised to find that the government has barely looked at it from that lens. So perhaps an undertaking from you to look at it through that lens would help the Treasury to see what you and I clearly both see, which is that social care is worth investing in.
Yeah, I've always approached this on the basis that the health service and social care are important for physical, mental health and the support that people need throughout their lives, but they're also hugely important to the economy. For reasons we just rehearsed in other answers, but the obvious, which is the longer people are unable to go back into work if that's what they want to do, the worse it is for them economically and for our economy more generally. So the two go together. And when we set out our plan for change, the number one mission was economic growth, but all the others, to my mind, ladder up to that, including what we're doing on health and social care.
This is Starmer's bait-and-switch defense in full motion. Moran has just exposed the central flaw in his claim. The funding increase changes nothing. It does not build. It does not repair. It does not hire. It simply props up what is already broken. But instead of admitting that, Starmer pivots to the size of the figure, £3.7 billion, a 6.8% uplift. It sounds impressive, doesn't it? That is the trick. Big numbers distract from small impact. The real insult is that he presents cash terms as real progress, when anyone in the care sector knows inflation, wage pressures, and rising demand swallow that money whole. You do not revive a failing system with 6.8% in cash terms. You barely stop it from falling apart. Starmer's message to the care sector is brutally misleading. Yes, you are on fire, but look, we will increase the water budget next year.
And just one final slight about turn. We have heard a lot of the conversation about tariffs, and you'll know in the past President Trump's approach to our NHS when it came to UK-US trade negotiations. He had his eye firmly on parts of the NHS. Now, you've said publicly that nothing is off the table. Does that include everything to do with the NHS, which includes drug patents, negotiated prices for medicines, and market access for US companies?
Well, I've been very protective of the approach we take the NHS in any dealings with any other country, because it is our greatest asset and we are not trading it away. And that's the approach that I take here.
Including all the areas I've just mentioned?
Well, including the data that we hold, which is private information. It must be held securely. I do think there's work we can do on what use we make of that data, not so much in trade agreements, but right here in the United Kingdom in terms of advancing our own understanding of medicines and preventative measures. But I take a protective approach when it comes.
This is the moment of confession. This is where Starmer's mask slips, and behind the polite tone and long-winded reassurances, we see the real Keir Starmer, a man who views care not as a moral duty, but as a tool for labor efficiency. He does not reject the premise, he absorbs it. In doing so, he reduces people to units of GDP. His response presents social care not as an ethical or humanitarian obligation, but as a productivity problem. You do not reform care to protect dignity. You reform it to push more people back into work. Notice how he repeats the word absolutely again and again, using it as a substitute for substance. It is verbal duct tape holding together sentences that promise nothing. Then comes his defining line. Our number one mission is economic growth. That is not just revealing, it is damning. It tells you exactly where his priorities lie. This is not about rescuing social care. It is about monetizing it. Everything climbs toward growth, not justice, not dignity, but output. And that is precisely what Moran exposed. She was not merely asking a question. She set a trap by forcing him to view social care through a treasury lens. She pushed him to reveal how narrow and cold that lens already is. Starmer thinks like an accountant, not a statesman. This response proves it.